My name is, let me shut this door. I do have a teacher voice, and because I taught 28 years, and the person down the hall would say, could you shut your door? Yes, I will. I'm Cindy Dronick, and I taught math for 28 years, and I started working for Scholastic, and we have merged, and my slides still say SMI. We're working to rebrand to get MI, and I still have a tendency to say SMI. I'm working on it to do MI. But I just found out in this last group, because I was told that you really needed some help with your Scholastic Central, and I see that some people don't have it. I finally now know why they don't have it, I think. So I'm going to try it out on your computer and to see, and then I will make sure I write this up and we send it out to everybody that's having trouble with it. But anyway, I am from HMH, and Lisa is from Metametrics, and she is going to start us off. Do you mind if I look at it? Lisa, will it bother you if I look at this?
Not at all. Please do. Okay, so thanks for coming. Welcome. I am from Metametrics, which is in Durham, North Carolina. So I'm from North Carolina. I actually live near the mountains, though. I live near Asheville. So I'm happy to be here with you today. And I just wanted to kind of start off by giving you kind of a little story about myself, just a little background about me. And that is, I have 3 kids, okay? They're all grown now, of course. But anyone here have kids? Everybody? Not Sarah. Okay. Not yet, right? Anyway, they were like stair-step kids, right? Year and a half apart, 3 of them. Like, oh, it was crazy, right? I don't even remember much about those early years. But the first 2, great students, never had any trouble in school, always did their homework. I didn't have to worry about anything. I thought, this is pretty easy. Then along comes Alan, okay? Alan, out of the womb, hates school. I don't know why, but he just never wants to go. It's a struggle for 12 years to get him to go to school. It was just like, oh, my worst nightmare. But fast forward to 9th grade. Alan's in 9th grade. He heard everyone has to take a language. He heard French is the easiest. He takes French. Okay, signs up to take French, because I'm thinking, what is this kid ever going to do with his life? He's in this French class, and the teacher says to them all, I want you to go research out a French dish, and I want you to research it and cook it and bring it in. We're going to have a French dinner. We're going to speak French at this dinner. It's all very cool. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go, right? Mom's going to have to research it. Mom's going to have to cook it. No, he went and researched out this dish, and I can remember to this day what he made. It was coq au vin. You know what coq au vin is? It's fancy, right? It's like this fancy French thing. I was like, he makes this dish and takes it in and kind of starts getting interested in cooking, and I'm very happy to say that today Alan is an executive sous chef thanks to a teacher. So I owe my son's whole career to one teacher. So I want to tell you, if you think what you do is not important, it is very important, and this is one parent who has a teacher to thank for it. So thank you for what you do, okay, all year long. But today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Quantile framework, and then I'm going to spend a little bit more time giving it over to Cindy so she can talk about your questions about the reports and about the Scholastic Central and all that. But we'll just start out with learning this technology the right way and talking about the Quantile framework. We're going to talk a little bit about what in the world is this Quantile framework, where did it come from, how was it developed, why should I use this, like what's the benefit of it, what good is this going to be for me as a teacher, and then how does the Quantile framework help to improve instruction. Basically, we're going to end up with how does the Quantile framework help teachers to improve instruction. That's our overall goal. So do you know about the Lexile framework? Elementary teachers in the earlier group all knew about this, but you've heard that word. It's kind of like a household word, right? Metametrics created the Lexile framework and the Quantile framework. So they have some similarities. I just kind of wanted to let you know about the similarities. They're both developmental scales, which means they measure things in a progression, right, on a scale. They're different, of course, scales, Lexile scale, Quantile scale, they're different. but similar, right, in that they measure developmentally. They measure two things on that scale. They measure that are important to learning, the learner and the lesson. They're put on the same scale, okay? So a student can have a Lexile measure of reading ability and a quantile measure of mathematics readiness to learn, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that means in a minute. Likewise, books can have a Lexile measure of difficulty, and math lessons and software activities can have a quantile measure of math difficulty. So they're parallel, okay, in that sense. And they're both used to help teachers to teach more effectively. That's the main goal of both of the frameworks. So here's kind of like an overview of what are the components of this quantile framework. We have there on the left, see you guys are deriving the benefit of me doing this once before because I learned how to use my clicker in the last session, okay? This is the quantile map, and what this is really representing is, it's representing the skills and concepts, the taxonomy. You've heard that word, taxonomy? It's a listing of skills and concepts. That's the backbone of the framework, and so this is representing that on this side. This linking technology, that's the middle thing that says, okay, well, I have an assessment, and it has to get linked up to be able to report a quantile measure. There's a lot of really brainiac people who work at Metametrics. I'm not one of them. They're called psychometricians, and they actually do all this linking statistical stuff, okay? I know enough to be dangerous about that, so they don't let me do that usually, but it's very cool, and there's a lot of science behind it, okay? So that's this linking technology that says, here's what this means to your assessment. Finally, this I do know about, and that's our resource database. That is a whole bunch of resources on the quantile scale that have been calibrated, okay? And we're going to take a really close look at that, the resources as well. But this is kind of the components, the big picture view. So I'd like to spend just a minute talking about this quantile framework and how it was developed, okay? Because when I heard this for the first time, I actually have spent pretty much my career in producing educational products and publishing, okay? And so when I first heard about this framework maybe 10, 15 years ago, well, maybe 12 years ago now, I got all goosebumpy because I'm like a math person, right? And I was like, a scale, you know, for math? It was like the coolest thing ever. So I snuck into a session and learned about it and then called the Metametrics people up and I said, I really want to put this into a product because I can measure growth with this, right? And that was very important, especially for intervention students. So put it in the product, got to know them, and then kind of liked them a lot, right? And then went to work for them when the opportunity came. But when I first learned about how this framework was developed, I got even more goosebumpy because it's cool, okay? So if Sarah and I sat down and we said, I would say, I think, Sarah, this skill is more important than this skill. And she would say, no, I think this skill is more important than this skill, right? One of us would be right. It might not be me, although I'd like to think I'm always right, but it might be Sarah, right? And so experts who sit down and judge this, you know this from maybe sessions you've been about vertical alignment when you're talking about your curriculum, right? Is this harder than this? Well, Metametrics actually, back when the framework was developed, went and got tens of thousands of students, gave them assessments based on a set of skills and concepts, and then rank ordered all of these, okay, and said, here's the difficulty of these based on the Roche model, okay, if you've heard that term before, Roche model, and then put them all into like this big framework. But because this was empirically derived from data, it's more replicable than what two experts would be judging this alone. So this should instill some confidence in the framework for you, right? That this is based on data and developed from real students, thousands of them, tens of thousands being tested. So that's kind of a little bit about the background. You can go on our website, which we're going to go on to later, and read lots of good stuff about how this was developed. It's more detail if you're interested, okay? And welcome, person who just came in, and your name is? Todd. Thanks, Todd. And there's a sign-in sheet floating around. If you can sign that for me on the bottom, that would be super. So a little bit about the development of the framework. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Lots of kids tested, put them in order. Okay. The framework itself, okay, let's talk a little bit about that. The Quantile framework works a lot like a ruler, a thermometer, but it doesn't measure length or temperature. It measures student readiness to learn, okay? Now, that's important, okay, because readiness to learn is different. It's different on the math side than it is on the reading side. And let me tell you why. If you're a reader, you're going to learn to read independently, right? Like you read and you get better reading by reading, okay? You can do that on your own. Can you generally learn something new on the math side on your own? You don't really learn math independently, do you? You learn it by someone showing it to you first, right? So the Lexile scale is anchored at the 75% understanding level because that's independent, right? The Quantile scale is anchored at the 50% understanding level, which means a student is ready for instruction, okay? And why that's valuable is if I could match the ready for instruction student with the instruction at that level, then I've got a good match because the teacher's going to present the material, student's going to be ready for it, life is great, right? Does that make sense? So it's slightly different between the Lexile and Quantile scale, but it's readiness for instruction, okay? And so the framework itself goes from down here, EMs, okay, which are really, I'll explain that in a minute what that means. It goes from about EM 400 all the way up to about 1600 Q, okay? That's the level of the scale. And so the EM down here, okay, really means negative numbers, okay? The scale was anchored at about 500, which meant that there was a 0 point, which meant that there were some skills below 0. Well, we never, ever want to associate a negative number with a student. So we said that this is EM instead of the negative. So it really replaces the negative sign, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So if you're down here and you have EM 300, that's a lower skill than EM 100, and you're all understand integers, so I don't have to explain that anymore. Good, got that. Okay, emerging mathematician is what EM stands for, which is very cool, by the way. Emerging mathematician is what EM is. And in middle school and up, you're probably not going to be working much with these EM measures, okay, because that's not, or maybe you are. Okay, saw some EMs, okay, all right. So here's a couple things that the Quantile framework is not, okay? It's not a way to indicate mastery. As I explained, it indicates readiness for instruction, okay? So just kind of get that in your head. It's not the curriculum. It's not a math program. You can get a Quantile measure from a math program or a math assessment. It's not a grade equivalent, although there are typical grade ranges for students. It's not the assessment, but Quantile measures come from assessments, okay, but they're not the assessment. Metametrics doesn't sell an assessment, okay? We work with either states or publishing partners to develop assessments for them, but you can't buy one from us, okay? People get that confused sometimes. All right, so that's what it's not. So let's talk a little bit about how the student gets on the Quantile scale, okay? So like I said, the Quantile scale is like a thermometer, and so instead of degrees on a thermometer, we're measuring in quantile measures, which are represented by the letter Q, okay? This right here is an example of, in North Carolina, Metametrics has done what's called a linking study with their state. And so we're able to have students at the end of the year get a quantile measure for how well they did that year. Okay, that comes right on their student report. That doesn't happen in Georgia because you are only linked on the Lexile side. Students get Lexile scores on their student reports, but not quantile scores yet, right? But you get your quantile scores through other ways, right? Not from the state. But that's what this is. It just gets reported, and it means that students ready for instruction at the 1040Q level right there, okay? Here's what it looks like a little bit in MI. you get these reports. This is a growth report for an individual student that shows their progress. And I think this idea of showing growth is like the coolest thing ever, right? Because your student might be way down here, but they're growing, and they're growing at a really good rate, right? So there's two things going on. They're growing, and if they need to catch up, they need to grow at a faster rate than a normal student in some ways, right? So you're able to kind of track that. So I think this growth perspective is really good. Okay, so a student can get a quantile measure in one of two ways. They take an assessment that's been linked, like North Carolina's, or they take an assessment that's been developed with a partner from Metametrics, such as HMH MI. Could we work directly with them? All of the items in the assessment were either written by Metametrics because we know the measures of the items, or lately we've been reviewing things that come in that they're writing. But there's almost 10,000 items in the whole item bank. Okay, so it's like robust, right? Item bank for the product. And so we partnered with them. So students take these assessments and then they get a quantile measure. And here are the states that were actually, this is a little bit outdated, but this actually where Metametrics is linked, okay, to state assessment. On the Lexile side for you guys, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Wyoming, those are Lexile and Quantile linked states, as well as Kansas, that should be dark blue, and Maine. Maine should be dark blue. And we're linking with the SBAC assessment, so more states will be coming on in the fall. We'll have that linking function done in the fall. I mean, you know, when they take a linking test, you have to have students taking the test, right? It takes time. It's a very long process. So that's just a little bit about our footprint. But the light blue, what that means is for Georgia, it means that you get your quantile scores via a partner product, basically is what that means, light blue. Some products that we're partners with, there are some math products that, Math 180, we have been working with them. Voyager, their products, and these are some norm reference assessments down here. Students can receive a quantile measure from those. Interim benchmark assessments, of course, MI, and there's some others as well who we partner with to produce the assessments that yield quantile measures. Okay, so that's the student side. You got that? Students get it. They take a test that's been linked, basically. Okay. On the instructional materials side, all of the instructional materials get calibrated by Metametrics. Okay, so we take a look at math lessons, math software products, and we say those have this measure, and we calibrate them to the scale, right? So that work is done by Metametrics. And I'll show you examples when we get to the website of, you know, here's where you find all that good stuff, right? So in the calibration process is kind of like 3 people actually look at that calibration. They're all people who work at Metametrics. They know the quantile framework inside and out. They can like quote the numbers and the measures and all kinds of things, and they measure this. Here's an example of, and this will resonate with you, I think, Sarah, because you're a 6th grade teacher, right? You're 8th grade. Rekka's 6th grade. Sorry. Thank you. So this is your. This is the Glencoe math book, right? And you can go on our website now and you can see that each of these lessons right here has been calibrated. So you can see that for this lesson right here, I know the measure of that lesson. It's a 750Q. So I'm going to be able to know the measures of my students and the measures of the lessons, and I can see whether it's a good match or it's not a good match, okay? And I'm going to show you how to go on the website and find that, all right? So we have over 500 textbooks that have been calibrated to the framework. So you're all middle school. Is there anybody high school? Do you do all levels, or? Okay, we'll take a look to see if you're I don't know what book you're using for high school, but we can take a look and see what's there. There's a lot. Okay. Okay. So over 500 books have been calibrated. This is good information, and this is actually the most used part of our website, by the way. People go on here and keep looking for their lessons. Okay, this right here, I'm going to hand you out one of these. Is what's called a quantile map. Hi, Quentin. there's two versions of this. This first is a big 8.5 by, or 11 by 17, sorry. There's a sign-in sheet too, if you want to grab sign-in sheet. There you go. So this one, open this up. Okay, did you get one? Did you get a map?
Yes.
Okay. And you'll see this is really an exemplar sheet of what the framework is. You can hang this up somewhere. It's very colorful, right? And it shows the whole scale here on this side. In the middle, this is supposed to represent that this is an interconnected web of skills and concepts, right, that make up the framework. Some example ones over here on the right, but these are examples because there's over 550 skills and concepts in the framework, okay? That builds this up. So this is really an exemplar, kind of a representation. This map here, the smaller ones, these 11 by 17, we think are really good because, I'll hand this out to you and then I'll show it to you. These are showing kind of like exemplar students, right? And this is a really good thing if your parents are struggling with what is the Quantile framework, what does my Quantile measure mean? You're able to go and I'm going to show you what I would do with this, okay? This front page really describes the Quantile framework, okay? But then if I were in middle school, teaching middle school, I would take this front sheet, okay? And then I would take this sheet who has Sophia on it, right? See this one? And I would put these together like this. And I would print this off, right? This is my middle school example student, right? And then I send this home because this is like, here, you're teaching middle school. Here's a big overview, and then here's your example, right, student. That's at your grade level. If you're in high school, you could use, let's see, what is his name? Marcus. No, James, okay? So do you get the idea of this purpose of this map? Okay, good. It is. Yep. Yeah, it's available on the website. Yeah, and you can take one of these and you're welcome to copy the one you have. I mean, it's, available for your use. But I think that front back page to send home to parents, I think that can be really powerful because parents do struggle with what this means. I don't know if you've run into that at all. What is this? They kind of get Lexile measures easier. I don't know why. Not fair, right? So, yeah, they've seen it longer. That's right. That's right. You're absolutely right. Okay, so that's the map. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about two adjectives that describe the Quantile framework. Okay, and these are important. And this first one was actually my very first question when I first learned about the framework. Like, what? Okay, I asked the question, why isn't there a measure, okay, for every strand of mathematics? Why? I think that students should have a Quantile measure in geometry and one in measurement, right? That was my first question. And it turns out that, okay, when you think about this at the skill level, here's what's happening. It's unidimensional, okay? So this is a unidimensional scale, meaning you get one quantile measure, and here's why. Let's take a look at this example. Here you have what we would call a measurement item. I'm going to measure and find the measure of the missing angle here, right? So I think that's measurement, but look at that skill level, what I've got to do. I have to know that it's a triangle, a right triangle. I have to know its interior angles at 180 degrees. Those are both geometry ideas. Then I have to know a right angle is 90 degrees. I have to know that. That's a measurement concept. Then either in my head or on paper, I'm going to kind of set up and solve an equation. I've got to do some algebraic thinking there because I've got to find that measure of the missing angle. And finally, I have to do the nuts and bolts. I've got to actually know how to calculate that, which in middle school, this is kind of where we sort of all fall down, right? Fractions and decimals, right? So, but look at that all together. I've used skills from almost every strand to do this particular item. So that's why we say this is unidimensional, okay? And so it makes logical sense, but Metametrics was like, well, you know, they're a research company, so they're like, that's not good enough. So someone did their dissertation on this exact topic, that, I'll give you my card at the end if you're interested and you want to learn more about this unidimensionality. And what they found out was when you're considering this at the skill level, students didn't do well in one strand versus the other on the skill level, okay? They really, because of this reason, right? It's logical, makes sense. So they backed that up with their research. So unidimensionality, one measure. It's also developmental across strands, and what that means is that you're going to use skills going across strands as you kind of move through the curriculum. So here's a skill of using skip counting. You're going to start out modeling multiplication using it. Then look, you're going to jump, and you're going to be in numerical operations. Then you're going to jump to algebraic thinking when you're talking about patterns, right? I'm going to describe things with patterns. Finally, you're going to actually go through and when you're learning how to read like a graph that's scaled, you're going to go 10, 20, 30, 40, and you're going to kind of count and use skip counting there. So it's developmental across strands, right? Goes across strands. So those are just two adjectives about the framework. In case that was your first burning question that you wanted to know, I answered for you. Did you see me learning my technology there? Sarah's like, oh. I clicked the wrong button. Like I thought I was like clicking the pointer. Okay, makes sense? Anybody want to arm wrestle over that one? Okay, good. So next we're going to move to why do I want to know this? Why can I use this? What is this going to do for me as a teacher, okay, or as a coach? What we're going to show you is how I can connect the student ability to the skill, okay? I'm going to see, I'm able to tell how well a student's going to do on a particular lesson, forecast their understanding, and if I don't think they're going to do well or I think they're going to be like bored, I can actually differentiate instruction for them on the student level. And finally, and I think this is an important one, monitoring growth over time. I think that's very, very important to be able to do. So that's what the Quantile framework does for you and what Quantile measures can do for you. So let's take a look at how we can do this kind of connecting thing with students. I have some example students here, okay? First we have Laura. She took math inventory. She got 450Q, okay? That's just her measure, Quantile measure after taking the assessment. She's going to be working on, ooh, look at this. I have to see, does this value satisfy equation or inequality? That's an 860Q. That's been measured and calibrated. That's part of the framework. That's its measure. What do we think about that? Look how far apart these are, okay? Do you think Laura is going to be ready for instruction on that skill? Likely not, right? So I know going in, I know the measure of the lesson, I know the measure of Laura, I know it's not a match, I know she's going to need something, I know that going in. I'm going to adjust her forecast and understanding by giving her some pre-skill work, scaffold instruction, do something like that for her, but I know that information about Laura going in. How about Marcus here? Marcus is at a 950Q and he's going to be working with histograms and bar graphs, right? That's at a 970Q. He's pretty much on target. He's within plus or minus 50Q, okay? So he's going to be like a good match, right? You know that you're probably going to be okay with him. But then, and so, but every student is not going to be there. Especially the higher up you go, the more, you're going to have different groups. Juanita here, she's at a 950Q as well, but look what she's going to be working on. Something that's kind of pretty much of a low level skill for her. Juanita is likely to breeze through this. I better have something in my back pocket ready for Juanita to do because she's going to get bored, start talking, something like that. So kind of this information in a big global way with your classrooms, but what this helps you to do is pinpoint that on the particular lesson, okay, or skill you're working on. So that's the value. Make sense? Okay, good. Okay, so now that's kind of the top layer. Now we're going to dig a little deeper, okay, into what the framework is. So we talked about the scale. We talked about the units on the scale. Those are Qs, right? So if you took those, these points right here, okay, on this, you took and put that on a vertical number line, right? This is the scale, pretend. And you took 1 point on that, all right? That point right there, that is called a quantile skill and concept. And there's 550 of these that make up this vertical number line, basically, and each has a measure, and each shows the difficulty of the measure in relation to the other one, all right? So just think about it this way. A skill and concept is a specific math, a QSC is a specific math skill and concept, and they have a measure. And the measures relate to each other on the scale, all right? So this term QSC, you may be familiar with that from some of your reports in MI, okay? This must be a totally new word for you, but it really stands for quantile skill and concept. And the reason that it's important for you to understand a quantile skill and concept is a quantile skill and concept is part of what we call a knowledge cluster. This is a metametric term. A knowledge cluster really means I'm going to talk about the skill, I'm going to talk about its pre-skills, if any, okay? I'm going to talk about any supporting skills that are kind of sideways, and then I'm going to talk about impending skills that come above this. And this knowledge cluster is going to give you the ability to differentiate instruction easily, okay? Well, not that that's ever really easy, but I'm saying as easy as possible, right? Okay, so we'll show you a knowledge cluster. We're going to work with knowledge clusters a little bit later and how to do use the knowledge clusters to differentiate instruction. Let's take a look at an example of a knowledge cluster. Okay, I know you can't read that, but I'm going to make it bigger for you, okay? The knowledge cluster has the focus skill. That's the skill you're talking about in the middle, okay? So the focus skill here is I'm going to solve one-step linear equations and inequalities. This is grade 6, okay? Now, and I'm going to graph their solutions of the inequalities on the number line. That's a skill and concept, and then it has prerequisite skills. If I'm going to graph those on the number line, you see all these down here are prerequisites, but one of those is, hey, I better know how to locate points on a number line. I've got to have that before I can do that skill, right? That makes sense. Likewise, once I solve one-step equations, I'm going to go in grade 6, I'm going to go in grade 7, actually solve two-step equations, right? So you can see this hierarchy of skills, and the knowledge cluster is on our website for every single QSC, so you can see that information, and it's all readily available for you on quantiles.com. Okay. A little bit about the framework itself. You know, I talked about those tens of thousands of students, right, taking the assessments. Well, when Common Core came along, and I know your standards are based on Common Core, right? Is that right, Georgia? Okay. When Common Core came along, there were just some things about Common Core that were not, like, you know, normal. I've stopped calling them weirdo, but I did at one point, because now they're normal to me, right? But at one point they were like, what? So in the framework itself, we didn't have some things represented. We had some things missing. We had some things that got pushed down to lower grade levels, and so we felt like the measure wasn't good for that skill and concept anymore. So when we took a really, this happened about 2.5 years ago, okay? Really hard look at the framework and said, what does this need to have in order to make it be college and career ready? We added 81 new skills and concepts. Here's a couple examples. At a low level, we didn't have anything that represented two-step word problems, like I'm going to add them and multiply. We didn't have that. We just never had it, so we added that. This one here is a grade 4 skill now. It used to be grade 7, okay? Never used to do that until I got to middle school. Now it's in 4th grade, right? And then this one right here, I don't know if you've had the pleasure of teaching this, okay? This is not your old midpoint formula. This is much harder than the midpoint formula, okay? When you're taking a segment and you're portioning the segment into proportional parts, very much harder, right? So we felt like that could not be covered by the midpoint formula that we had in there. As a QSC, we added this, right? So we beefed up the framework, and then, well, we can't just make this stuff up, right? So we put them in knowledge clusters, and then we had to go back out and field test these, right? And say, test them with students, see how well they did, see if our measures are right, if not, adjust them and kind of back and forth. And so that's that empirical quality that we were talking about at the beginning about why that's important and, you know, why we don't use just expert judgment on this. Okay, so this takes us to the point where we're ready to actually start taking a look at the website itself, so you can learn some things about how to do this. You don't need to write all this down because I'm going to give you at the end this little cheat sheet so that you're able to actually go in for yourself and do some of this stuff. And then we're going to do an activity so you can practice, okay? So I'm going to go to the website right now. And this website is quantiles.com with an S, Quantiles, okay? And you are welcome to go onto quantiles.com and read all about the framework. What is it? What are the benefits? We have a research and publications. You can see lots of good research there, frequently asked questions. You can go and explore this on your own sometime when you get a chance this summer at the beach with a Mai Tai. You can also, and what we're going to spend our time on today is use the Quantile framework, okay? So has anybody been on quantiles.com? Have you used this at all? Okay, so, I can kind of go through this and just give you a little refresher then if you've used it before. But basically, you're going to be able to look things up, okay? So I'm going to go to the Math Skills database, and I'll be able to look either by standard or by keyword, okay? So let me look by standard first. I'm going to go to Georgia. I'm going to pick on grade 6, okay? And I'm going to pick the standard in here. Let's see. Let's do 6EE7, so we were talking about equations earlier. Solve real-world math problems by writing equations. So when I click on that standard and click search, I get 2 skills and concepts in the framework associated with that, right? 208 and 276. I'm going to do this right linear equations, okay? So I'm going to click on this. This is a skill and concept. Its measure is 800Q. This little number right here, that's just an identifier. There are people in our office that if I say, oh, that's QSE 276, they can rattle off this whole thing, right? I'm not there yet, but I'm older, right? So I have an excuse. But when I click on that skill and concept, I see a bunch of very cool things. I see, first of all, I can go look at the knowledge cluster for that skill and concept. So let's click on that. The knowledge cluster shows what are the prerequisite skills, what are the supporting, and what are the impending for the skill of write the linear equation in inequality to represent a given number or word problem. So I can see that if I have a student who's really, really not ready for this, I can go and click on the prerequisite skills. So say I want to do this, translate between models and verbal phrases or algebraic expressions. I click on that because they need to back them up, right? So I click on that, and then I can see that knowledge cluster for that skill and concept of translating between models and verbal phrases. And I can say, okay, well, if I need to back up further, I can do the translate between verbal phrases and numerical expressions. I can talk about an unknown and what that means. So I can go to each of these prerequisite skills and find things that I can use to kind of, get students to the point where they're ready. These are all calibrated to these particular skills and concepts. So you know that if you have a student at a certain measure and if you have a skill at a certain measure, it's a good match. These are all calibrated. All right, so let's go back to, actually I can look at this one. I'll go down and look at the resources for it. And you'll see that these are calibrated resources, okay? So if I needed a student to work on this, I could actually go to these Virtual Nerd videos. Do you guys know Virtual Nerd? Okay, Learn Zillion is another one we've linked to. Some Khan Academy videos, although I'm culling those because a lot of Khan Academy have just kind of like not a lot of concept behind them. These ones right here, if you're not familiar with illustrative mathematics, it's a very good website, and you can go in, and these are really good, robust tasks that are very Common Core aligned and designed to dig deeper into mathematics. And you can see some downloadable resources as well. All these are calibrated, all these are free. Okay, so if you need to go find things to help support instruction, here's where you go. And you use the knowledge cluster to get to the point where you're understanding what a student needs to kind of work on, right? So if I had a student who needed some more advanced work, what I would do is I could pick a skill and concept, but what I want to do is just to check and make sure that's also in my grade, right? So this one, 277, I'm going to click on that. That's an impending skill, meaning it's more advanced. And I can see that's a 7th grade skill, so I might want to use that or for a 6th grader, or I might not. You know, it just depends. So the impending, I think you need to kind of look at both the skill and also where it lies, because some of these might be high school. These are vertically aligned, so it doesn't necessarily, it's not like a curriculum. The next thing you teach, it's more like a vertical kind of scale. Any questions about the knowledge clusters? You can also go in and use and search by keyword, okay? If I go in and I just typed in the word, give me a math topic, anybody? I type in transformation without the S just to be sure, because it's going to search. Then I can see all the skills and concepts that go with transformations. I can then go look at their measures. I could see what they're saying. I could see which one I wanted to do. Here's, let's see. Where's one of my favorites? Look for the one that says algebra in it. Yeah. Transform and describe the transformations in simple algebraic terms. So if I click on that one, I can now see its knowledge clusters, okay? You know, and then I can see its resources as well, okay? This Schroeder site is really good as well. Yeah, and you can also go down to the bottom. There you'll see. Yeah. Yeah, at the very bottom you can click on Georgia again. Yep, sure. Yeah. Okay, so that's the second way to search, and that's under Use the Quantile Framework. I want to show you the Quantile Teacher Assistant. Has anyone used this before? You've used it? Okay. Okay, tell us a little bit about your experience with it. What do you like about it?
I like that because everybody in the class,
Okay, that's good. That's a good description. Let's choose that same standard we were talking about earlier, 6EE7. All right, this is a different view, okay? So what this allows you to do is in this kind of slider bar here, I know my ranges of my students from my class from my MI scores, right? So I can adjust this and it's going to change color depending on where my students are. So if I have some students that are way high, I have a really advanced class here, you can see that most of these are going to be below their range. Some of them are within their range, a couple are above. But as I slide this lower and lower, I get more that are either in range or below range, okay? So this is a 6th grade class, and if I have a bunch of students who are done in the 480s, lots of these skills and concepts are going to be below them, right? Or if I have a more advanced class, like I said, they'll be above. But then you can also, like if you wanted to work on a particular skill and concept here, you could click More, okay? And you'll see all the resources right there. Okay, they're all right there on, under that as well. Yeah, yeah, and if you, yeah, so you, yeah, and you can also click here and it takes you to different things for that skill and concept as well. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. That's the Quantile Teacher Assistant. Let me show you one more thing, and that is, well, two more things actually. First is find your textbook, okay? So we talked about the grade 6 textbook. I showed you that example. How about a high school textbook? You have to know your publisher. Let's look at this Big Ideas one. Do you use Big Ideas here? Oh, we have data right here. Okay, let's see, I typed in algebra, so we can do, let's see, HMH. Doesn't have the author, so it's hard to tell here. Okay, how about if I just, there's a lot of them, right? Like I said, there's over 500 textbooks that have been calibrated here. Oh, here's one for pre-calculus, Glencoe pre-calc. Oh, that's pre-algebra. Let's go back here and do pre-calculus. You have to, it might not be that, but it'll be really close to the McGraw-Hill. I think you have to go by the publishing year. You can put the ISBN in if you know it. There's pre-calc with limits. I think that's probably closed. Okay. You find it? Is everybody's textbook in here? You're going to have to find out your publishers for high school to see the variety of your different places using different ones. So tell me yours again. Your Okay, so how you can really tell is if you go up here, you know where the ISBN number is on your book?
Yeah.
It's on the back, right? Just type that number in and you'll be able to tell if it's that book or not, okay? If it's a state edition, it's going to be really close to one of the regular editions, okay? But the, when I had in that PowerPoint, I had thought this was your book series right here. Yeah, that's a line. Glencoe Math Course 1, Volume 2, Common Core. Yeah. So if you type in Glencoe Math Course 1, Common Core, is that it? It might be, you're saying for the Georgia edition, it might be kind of tweaked around. Okay. Okay. And then for high school, you're just going to have to find the publisher and look it up for yours and see if it's there. If it's not there, what are you going to do? You're going to take that topic that it's in there and you're going to enter it in the keyword search, right? Or look it up by standard. Yeah. Okay, let me show you one more thing on the website. I just want to tell you a little bit about this. And it's under Use, and it's called Summer Math Challenge. I just want you to be aware that we have the Summer Math Challenge. And what this is this is basically designed by Metametrics to stop summer learning loss. Okay, so it goes from grade 1 through grade 7. You're not going to have it for 8th graders yet, maybe next year. Or if you wanted to put 8th graders on 7th grade because they were struggling, you could. But it sends its parents sign up for this, okay? So you can spread the word. It starts actually next Monday, and it's 6 weeks. They get an email every day, and in the email, it has, here are some things that you learned during the year, okay? Every week is a different kind of topic area, like ratios and proportions might be one for grade 7, you know. Grade 3 might be multiplication. And so it's going to give them a video to watch, and it's going to give them an activity like a game or a practice sheet, something like that to do every day. It's not involving any teaching on the parents' part, okay? All the teaching is either through the review from the videos or, it's just going to be a practice game. So summer math challenge, if you have children and you want to sign them up, lower grades, stop summer learning loss. We're all about that, right? This is free to parents and uses some of the resources that you have seen before. 1 through 7. Not K yet. No, 1 through 7. Yes, and it'll go right to them. And the parent gets to, they answer a question about what grade their student is in, and then do you think your student is good at math, struggles with math, on level, lots of them say they're really, really good at math, right? But they can choose, and then it'll differentiate a different kind of like an activity for each of those 3 groups within a grade. Yeah, so if you're struggling, it gives you something a little easier to work on. Okay, but it's free and it's cool, right? Because we're stopping summer learning loss. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, so we are now going to switch gears, okay? And we're going to do an activity. And I think we're doing better on time this time, so I think we're okay. Oh, you did? Okay, good. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to give you this, because this was your little cheat sheet, which has all the instructions in it on how to do the things we just talked about in case you, forget, right? It's like easy. It's a step-by-step instructions of how to find things. You guys seem a little familiar with it, so you might be good, right? You've looked things up, but just to guide, okay, to help you kind of remember. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do, and then I'll hand this out next. But we're in summertime. I hope you're in summertime mode now. You seem to be paying really good attention today for being in summertime mode, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. But in summertime, what it reminds me of is marathon Monopoly games, okay? Or actually, my favorite game was Risk, okay? Anybody play Risk? You know that game? That's the armies, and I was always the pink ones, right, in the game. But Monopoly, played my fair share of that game, right, over the years. I want to talk a little bit about what skills and concepts do you think students are going to use when they're playing the game of Monopoly? Think about it. What do you do in Monopoly? Counting, okay? You're going to go 1, 2, counting. That's good. Money. It's not real money, but it's kind of the concept of it. Addition and subtraction. Even just adding the numbers on 2 die that are rolled. You need to know how to do that. And definitely addition. What about if I want to buy 3 hotels and they each cost $200? What about the card you turn over that says you owe 10% sales tax or whatever? Yeah, right? So percent. Anything else you can think of? Yeah, so I hadn't thought about that before, but probability. Can you read that? Okay, so just some ideas about some skills of geometry, right? So what we're going to do is, I'm going to first hand this sheet out to you, okay? And we're going to do this in a step-by-step manner. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make up 3 students, okay? Now, don't pick somebody you had this year and use their full real name, because that wouldn't be nice, okay? You might be like, I'm going to get back to a student in the summertime. Make up 3 names, and what you're going to do is you're going to make up their names and put them into, one is in the at-risk group, one is in the proficient group, and one is in the enrichment group. So just make up 3 names right now, okay? Can be Snow White, Superman, I don't care what their names are. Just make them up, okay? Okay, once you have your names there, look up here. And I'll show you how to find this. This is typical grade ranges, and this is based on data that Manometrics has gathered over the years, right? This column right here is the student measures. Okay, so student measures, and this is the interquartile range. If you remember, that means the 25th to the 75th percentile. Okay, so if you're in grade 8, okay, like Sarah, here's where your typical students are going to lie, right? And so this is your 25th percent student, and that's your 75th percent student right there. So you're going to make it up. Take your grade, make up a quantile measure for each of your students based kind of like in this range, okay? So just make it up. We talked about Monopoly. Your job today is to get a student ready to play Monopoly, okay, at a particular grade level, right? So you're going to choose one of these skills we listed here, okay? Then you're going to go on quantiles.com. Everyone has a computer, right? Okay. You're going to go on quantiles.com once you've chosen a skill, and you're going to enter that in the keyword search, right? You're going to search and find that skill and say, what would I do for a student on grade level, on, in the proficient range, or in the at-risk range, and in the enrichment range. And you're going to find one activity, one resource for them to use for that particular skill and concept using the knowledge clusters, okay? So you're going to go find the skill using the search, and then you're going to go look for that skill and concept knowledge cluster, and then back up to prerequisites and go into impending, and you're going to find activities for them to do, okay? So we'll do that for the next probably 10 minutes, okay? And then we'll move on and talk more about some details of the reports. Remember, the knowledge cluster is going to allow you to back up as far as you think you need to go, okay, for a particular student. And you're going to try to match the measure of the skill with the measure of the student as best you can, plus or minus 50-ish. And what you're probably going to, in reality, do is do this for your class, right? You're going to have, your kind of classes like, I know who's in the middle, I know who the strugglers are. There might be a few advanced. Or in your case, maybe you'll do this on an individual basis, right?
Yeah.
Because you're doing individualized learning, so. Okay. Then, thank you. That's very, very good. Yeah. Okay. So you can do this for your, like I said, for your class, and you kind of group your students and know, oh, you need some help. You're going to go on to do this. So that's the beauty. Okay. I think we need a little more time on the reports and things than what we had anticipated. So I think I'm going to have you wrap this up. I'm going to finish up my PowerPoint and kind of do a summary, and then we'll go to Cindy's presentation. Okay, where was I? Let's go down the way past here. Okay. So just a little bit of a summary. What can teachers do? Sequence materials, know whether they need to reteach, locate additional resources, and parents can use the quantile framework. Hey, my child's grown, 100 quantiles, and between tests, I can talk to the teacher about it. You can actually send parents to the site and have them look for things if you wanted to, okay? And there is a place on there I didn't go over with you called Math at Home. It's designed directly for parents. It has no things that involve teaching in them. The resources for you do, right? They're like lesson plans or, things. But for parents, it's all games, videos, things that they don't have to be involved in the teaching part of. Math at Home. Finally, just a little bit of summary. Our basic goal for using the framework is to take students, curriculum, resources, everything, put it on the same scale for the really ultimate goal of improving instruction and helping teachers, okay? Any questions on anything before we go over to Cindy from HNH? All good? Yep, you guys got it. So thank you. I'll pull your PowerPoint up for you.
Thank
you. Want to take
you.
a clicker?
Yes, thanks. Like I said, I taught 28 years, and sometimes I would do a lesson, and I thought, oh my gosh, I thought this would work, and it did not work. You can sometimes tell almost immediately, and then you would come back in and, start over. Well, I'm going to do this one a little bit differently than I did last time because I realized that some of you do not have Scholastic Central on your SAM. I'm going to show you how to get there. And I think it would be better if you want to go ahead and have SAM up. I should have said, let me get on that website first because I decided just to change my plans in midstream. Yeah. All right, I'm just going to log into a simulator, but if you're on yours, I can show you where to go and find it, and you can go ahead and change it. Okay, I do need to look at my password. Pardon me? I am not, let's look at it. That I am not 100% positive, but I'll find out. Well, I'll show you where it is on a computer for a teacher. Unfortunately, on here, I do not have an administrator setting. I'm using my Math 180 one because for some reason the simulator that I have just for SMI or MI is not working. So I thought, well, let me go here because I do have an SMI as part of Math 180. When I come here, I really want this to show up at the bottom. See where it says SMI Standalone? That's what your Scholastic Central would look like. And the reason that makes Scholastic Central so nice is because it's a quick, easy way because it can show up on your dashboard. I can click on 2 and it tells me which of my students are advanced, or I can go to 3, find out which are basic. So it's just a real quick way of doing this. I can look over to the left. It tells me the students that have completed the test have not started it. I also can, if I go to Class Analytics on here, I now can look at this. I can see all of my students. Whoops, I do that sometimes. And we can talk about this more on a report, but I can also see who has passed the screener, who has not passed the screener. If it's a closed circle, they class a screener. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I realized last session I had more questions on the test than I had anticipated because I was told y'all really wanted reports and Scholastic Central. So I will take care of both of those, whichever questions you have. But so right now, what I want to show you is when you're on Scholastic Central, see how you have the arrow to the right? Because this is my screener for addition, then my screener for multiplication, my quantile. So it has a lot of information for me. On Scholastic Central, I can also look at students. It's a little bit faster than SAM. There's nothing wrong with SAM, but this is just another way for you to do it. I want to change it to quantile growth. I can go down here where it says run a report. And I can run reports from here. I can do the same thing as I did on SAM. I can customize the date. I can choose which report to run. I can do a report by a teacher or by a class or by a student, just as you can on SAM. Now this one, you notice it says, please go to SAM to run it. Well, it will tell me that if I need to do that. Now, remember too, I'm using a simulator. I'm going to try to do it. I'm not sure if we can do it on here if I go to class profile. All right, this is one place you can do it. And I'm going to show you the place in SAM because y'all don't have this to do it. However, see where it says math inventory because it says manage applications. You should have up here where it says gateway. I'm going to click on gateway and I'm going to SAM. All right, so for those of you that want a Scholastic Central, this is what you need to do. Click on, I'm going to do SMI Standalone. And remember, you double click it so that as the SMI is in yellow, so is my roster in yellow. If I were in reports, I would double click it and they would both be in blue. All right, so I'm on the SMI Standalone. So when you are there, at the upper right, do you have something that says Edit Class Profile? All right, click on Edit Class Profile.
Edit profile.
Okay. edit profile. This one says edit class profile. It may be a little different on the simulator. Now, do you see where it says manage applications?
You have to select a class.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry. I did that. I did. I'm sorry.
Each class.
But see, I could do it. I am in a class. Let me cancel that. All right, yes, on yours. I don't even have a class on here. This simulator is a little bit different. So my simulator's slightly different. So go to your, choose a class. And I don't know why they don't. I can do it this way, I think. I think I can use the Math 180. Then if I go to edit class or profile, there we go. Now, you have to, under manage applications, you have to have math inventory checked. Now go to edit right there. Yes, because if you don't do, now it takes 24 hours for the change to occur. So you won't see Scholastic Central then until tomorrow. Because now, did you have yours? Because you're going to check math inventory, click, and then save.
You do that for each of your classes.
That each application, yes,
Every
yes,
single class.
that you have.
Yeah.
May I, was that enough on the Scholastic Central part? Now that y'all have that, is that what you needed for that? Okay, great. So I'm going to get out of there then, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew how to do that, because what you're doing on SAM, you can also do on Scholastic Central, and sometimes it's just a little bit faster. So it's up to how you want to look at it. Some teachers prefer the Scholastic Central, some prefer SAM, and that's entirely up to you how you want to do it. And I left my book over there. All right, we're talking about MI. I really wish, like I said, as a teacher, I had MI, because as in all math classes, you have a low level and you have a higher level, and it's really hard sometimes to know what those students that are at the lower level need to catch up. And then I didn't want my kids at the upper level being bored, so I would have to come up with projects, and I had some games, and I came up with a lot of different things. If I had had Quantiles.com, it would have saved me a great deal of work, and it also would have enabled me to work with those students individually more than I could in a large classroom, especially not really knowing what they were ready to learn. I think that the idea of having a difficulty level of a concept and what my student is ready to learn is just wonderful. I'm so glad that Metametrics came up with that. So what we're talking about, though, with our reports, this is your book. I don't know if you received one last year when y'all had training or not, but I will make sure that you have one now. And this is yours. You may write in it. You also, for those of you that are administrators, if you know this, this is also in SAM under resources. So you can go in there and print copies if you need those. Or save it as a PDF file on your computer, because it saves on paper. And I know where I taught, we were always worried about paper, especially toward the end of the year. And I think that as math teachers, we would agree that algebra is where we're trying to get our kids. This is where we want our students to go. It has been proven that students that can do well in algebra are more prepared for entering the workforce right out of high school, are going to a type of post-high school training, or going to college. So this is what we're trying to do. With MI, we're showing you this is a trajectory toward algebra and beyond. So this is what we're trying to get them. We can get them to algebra, we can hopefully get them to college then. Now, this is our proficiency band, our performance band, sorry. We have worked with Metametrics to tweak this, and I'm going to show you where it is in your book. It's a slightly different, so you're going to change it. This is on page 48 in your book. And there are some incorrect bands in your book. I thought about giving you a piece of paper. I think we'll send this out as a PDF file, though. But since you have your book, I want to make sure you have the corrections so that if you're looking in here, you are not looking at the wrong ones. If you look at kindergarten, below basic, it should be EM 400 to EM 190. EM 400, yes, EM 400 to EM 190. Kindergarten basic should be EM 185 to 5. So those two are incorrect in this book. The next change is grade 1 basic. That should be 65 and not 6. Okay? The other ones are on grade 8. Basic should be 855 to 1025. And proficient 1030 to 1255. So, yes, 1255. So now if you had, yes. So with those changes, your book is now correct. Pardon me?
And then for 8th grade, so it's like 1030 to 1250 and then 1260.
Yes, 1260 and above. But we will try to send these out as a PDF file so that you'd have them. It's just so I thought about printing it off, but I thought if you have this book and you write it in the book, hopefully you'll know where it is instead of putting it in a safe place and not being able to find it like I have done many, many times. All right, any questions? Now, one thing about these performance bands, and we had some questions on this, these performance bands are for the end of the year. So when a child comes into 4th grade and takes the test for the first time, they are really probably not going to be advanced or proficient in 4th grade because they have just finished 3rd grade. So that's what's confusing about the bands, and especially with parents. You'll say, well, this is your child is here, but by the end of the year, hopefully this is where they will be. We have done some tweaking on this with Metametrics and HMH, and we are trying to come up to make sure that it does reflect the correct quantile score. Okay. So just to let you know that, we've had some questions, but the main thing is once we do this, we want to be able to do the results. I've given this assessment to my child or my classroom. What am I going to do with it? I don't want to test just to test for assessments purposes. I want to know how to use it. So this is why we have these reports that you're going to deal with. I had this at first because Lisa and I hadn't really talked about how our slides might overlap a bit. But this is the same thing that she talked about. What do we want to do with it? You know, how can we use the MI scores once we get those? And this is basically exactly what she had said. And we do have the 4 categories, the advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic. And it is also on page 22 in your book. You can see up at the top. Anytime there is whoops, lost my red. It's there. So the definitions are there. When you were looking, though, on page 48, you do have more information about Scholastic Central. There is a lot there, and so you have this, and you could go over this with any of your teachers or administrators that they would have access to that to know more about Scholastic Central. All right, so let's take a look at the reports. I had done this before. Like I said, I changed it a little bit. I wanted to go and show it to you live from what it says. One thing we did not talk about, though, when it does say if a student takes a test under 15 minutes, usually there's a reason for it. You know, in the old days, we called it the swag method. We would watch the students bubble in, and they made this cute little design. And we always said, okay, this student did not really try because all they did was go in and just do maybe ABC, or whatever, tar backwards, so it looked really good. The first report, the reports start on page 66. However, page 64 tells you which report you might want to use and how to use it. Now, and I don't think we had an administrator in here last session because I did have questions on how often you should give this test. Now, we recommend 3 to 5 times, but I said it's up to the district. Every district, y'all give it 3 times. Okay. So that's what I told them. I said it's up to the district. We make recommendations, but it's entirely up to you, especially for elementary students. Beginning, middle, and end is really all you need. And since y'all have, do you have testing windows?
Yeah.
Great.
Last year we did not, because it was our year 0, but this year, the testing windows are on the testing calendar.
Great. Okay. So then there will be no questions. And it's nice to know that. I should have asked that before on that, and I meant to ask Kathy that. So now I know when we come back that you do have that. So you don't have to worry about that then. You know exactly when you're going to test those students. So one of the first reports that you're going to look at is on page 66. It's called the Instructional Planning Report. And the nice thing about all of our reports, they have a lot in common. They're always going to, at the top of the page, tell you which report it is. It will give you the class, the teacher, and the date. And you can customize it if you have run any reports, whether it is SAM or Scholastic Central. There is a place you can go in and you can either ask it to do it for the entire year, for a certain grading period, or you can say, I want to look at this. Actually, since you have a window, it would be really easy because you're going to put that time in there and you're going to get those tests. Now, on this, you notice, first of all, you're going to have the performance of each student. It will tell you whether that student is proficient or advanced or basic or below basic. And do y'all know enough about the screener, why this is there? On the beginning of the test, and last session they didn't seem to know this, but there's always a screener given on the test. If a student passes it, they will not see that screener again. If they don't pass it, they will see that screener each test. The way you know they pass it is because if you have a closed circle, they passed it, and if you have the half closed circle, they did not, and they will see it again, okay? Then you do have your scores, your quantile measure, the date it was taken, and the nice thing about it, they tell you the minutes, exactly how many minutes it took that student to take that test. So if a student only took 8 minutes to take it, and they have a low quantile measure, then you know to watch that student, talk to them, see what happened, if they had problems. We're always asked whether you can drop it. The math inventory is a little bit different than the reading inventory because I believe the reading inventory you can. On ours, about the only thing you can do is go to where we were managing the classes and editing, and you can put to take it closer than 30 days because it's recommended to never take it unless it's more than 30 days apart because you don't have enough instructional time to have a significant difference in the test scores. But that way you could have that and then you could retest that student if you felt it absolutely necessary. Sometimes though, if the student didn't do as poorly as you may think they should have, the computer's going to, the next time, it'll catch them up. It may take them a little longer when they're testing, but since it's a computer adaptive, it will start them off where they left off, and if they're answering the questions, it's going to just keep getting harder and harder. Because I did have this one math coach in another state said, boy, I took that test and I didn't think it was ever going to end. I said, well, you are a math coach. You know, you do know the math, so of course it's going to take you a lot longer. And it is untimed, and some people last session did not realize that. We do suggest, though, that after 40 minutes, fatigue can set in. So if I had a student that was testing longer than 40 minutes, I would stop them. You can go back to this test as long as you go back within 2 weeks. If you wait longer than 2 weeks, they would have to start over. But if you go back in, the child logs in within 2 weeks, it picks up where they left off. Obviously, the sooner you can get them back on, the better, because they're going to remember a little bit more. Okay. And then you do have your normative data that is there. This is only the first page. The other thing I like about this page, and I knew they were going to do that, you do have your year-end bands at the bottom. So that's kind of nice because then you'd have to,
And those are just the middle people, the interquartile.
I don't think we do the interquartiles. When you said that, Lisa, I was listening to that and I thought, I don't think we do. And I wanted to compare that with what she had.
Let me clarify something, that there are two different things, though. Those were expected student grade ranges. That means this is where students are. That's different than performance standards of saying where students should be. So they're two different things. These are typical grade ranges. This is where a typical student is. Doesn't mean that's the standard you're setting, right?
And that's what I thought, but I was going to ask her about that afterwards. This is the first time I've had the pleasure of listening to Lisa, and I was really excited about it because I love this, the program. And I thought, oh, yes, I get to hear her and see that. But that's what I had thought, too, because we were told this is where your student should be in third grade, and if they have a certain score, they would either be advanced proficient or whatever. Those are the performance bands. And they are listed at the bottom. And it always gives you the purpose of a report and tells you how to follow up. Now, this is a long report because on the second page, it will always tell you who needs help in the addition and multiplication screeners. If you know that, you could go to quantiles.com unless you have materials already that you want to use, and you could find additional material to help those students with that. It will also list the students that are, well, I was hoping it would go to this one. Didn't quite, it kind of did. But on that one, you can see that, I almost have to put my glasses on to read this, that this is on the next page, 68, that Jacqueline and Henry both had 1,100 quantile measures. So, tells me some things I could do for those two students. Now, this is just for my proficient students. I'm going to have another page for, I'm sorry, these are my advanced students. I'm going to have another page for my proficient students. I'm going to have another for my basic, excuse me, and another for my below basic. So this can be a very long report, depending on how many students you have in your class. Okay. Any questions about the instructional planning report? Okay. And you notice back here, when I go back, it does tell you the QSC. It also gives you a standard. So you could look either one of them up. This is a report that I really like as a teacher, the Progress to College and Career Report, and it starts on page 70 in your book. And on this, a nice thing about it, you also have your class mean. So if a parent comes in and says, well, I know my child is way above average. Well, in a polite way, you can talk about reports and say, well, this is the class average, and this is where your student is, and this is what we can do to help your child come up to the average or go beyond. And I like the fact of the trajectory, because then we can see how that student is progressing toward algebra, toward pre-calculus, whatever. And once again, it has the performance bands. All the tests are going to, all the reports are going to have the same thing. Then when we go to the second page, once again, it is going to have the screeners and their scores. Okay. Any questions on the Progress to College and Career? It's a nice report. It's really good for students too when they can see that they're moving up that scale. And it also is several pages. Okay. And once again, it does tell you some skills and concepts for certain individual students. You can click on that student and work just with that student. You can get things for your entire classroom. All right, the next report is your student test printout, and that is on page 76, and it is exactly what it says it is. However, this can be a very, very long report, so I would not recommend printing it all. I would save it as a PDF file, but if I had a parent coming in and I need to discuss certain ones, then I would go ahead and print it. But bear in mind, it could be 20 pages or more, depending on, yes, on that. So, yeah, that's what would take a while to look at on that. But there may be times when you would really, especially if you wanted to conference with a student, and to find out what they did. But you could also look at it on your computer and pick out certain things, or like I said, save it to as a PDF file on your computer. All right, and then on page 78 is a really nice report, is the growth report. And the reason people really like this growth report is because you can actually see it. And it is so nice when you see how much growth these students have made. And, you know, sometimes we look at the others and we all go, well, this wasn't very much. But, you know, for some students, that's a lot. And so I think that's what's so nice about it, is because I can say, well, this child, yes, it may not look like this child has grown, but I know this child, and this is remarkable for them. And so that's what's really good about this report.
What is like an average yearly growth?
Well, when they say that, it really differs. The younger you are, the more growth we see. Sometimes it may only be 50 quantiles. Sometimes it could be 100. There is something I will send out for y'all. I'll make a note and have Kathy include that as a PDF, and that you can see that. I think once you get into the high school level, sometimes you may not see over 50 to 100 quantiles. You may not even see that much. So it really depends. The younger you are, you're going to see more growth per year. Yes?
What does it mean when you have several kids that are dropping?
Okay. There are a couple of things. One thing, that's one reason we have tweaked it with Metametrics, and we changed the algorithm a bit, because we noticed that, and so we wanted to make sure some items were added to the test, and fixes have been sent out on those. So sometimes, though, when I've gone back into schools and I've coached, if they've only dropped 50 to 100 quantiles, sometimes that's not a real cause of concern. But I know when a student drops a lot, that does cause us to say, what is going on? The first thing I would do is talk to the student, for one thing. Did you have something to add? Yes.
I just wanted to add to that. Just keep in mind that this is a measurement, okay? Mm-hmm. And so it has inherent measurement error in it. The student's hungry that day. The student, you know, something is going on with them emotionally. You know.
Just with several kids, and they said the same thing was happening at all the time. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't just my school.
So,
and the kids are discouraged by it.
Yes, sure.
They're trying to take it seriously, and a lot of them were dropping.
Well, and like one thing when Lisa, I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Well, I think one thing that was happening, and one of the corrections that was made, is that they were getting questions that were the first time be kind of like beyond where they were, and so they dropped down. When you drop down, it's hard to kind of climb back up. So first time they might have gotten a higher like quantile measure, and then they were given harder questions, and then they dropped, and then a harder time climbing out of where they dropped from. And that's just, part of that is the nature of computer adaptive testing. So what they did, one of the tweaks was they kind of capped where they could go, like how high they could go in their, like beyond their grade level, in order to keep that from happening. So it's the nature of computer adaptive, and one thing I like about HMH was they are making the fixes to it, right? So they're saying, okay, this is computer adaptive, and we're kind of seeing this as a trend, so now we're going to correct that. So you shouldn't see that again. But if you do see it as a trend, you might see it individually, and that's what I was talking about, measurement error. Just keep that in mind, that it is a measurement.
Yeah, and plus, you're going to be targeting your students for that first test. I understand the new students, because, you know, you only target new students. After the first test, you never target again because the computer does it. And I think what Lisa said is right. And, you know, sometimes they're just lucky. I mean, they might guess right on some of them, and they may not really know. But I was going to say what Lisa said. That's why I would talk to the student. Maybe something was going on that day. There could have been a family emergency. They might have been hungry. They may not have gotten any sleep the night before. You don't know. I mean, I realize I've mentored a child since she was in 5th grade, and she's now a freshman in college. And she texted me when I was in California and said the police here are with shotguns. Well, if this child had to do something the next day, and, you know, I never in my life have had, I don't know if they had shotguns, but she said guns pointing at her, and, you know, she had done nothing. So we don't know what goes on sometimes with these kids. I mean, I think it's remarkable sometimes that they actually can come to school and do anything, some of our children, about what's going on. So who knows what happened to them? But that is a good question, and we are aware of that, and that's why we have worked with Metametrics to try to make sure that the assessment is more reflective. But like Lisa said, sometimes you're just going to have some drops. It's just, that's going to happen. But if you see that again, we'll talk about that. The test activity report, I skipped over this one. This is for administrators, but since some of you are in the room, on page 80 is that performance level growth report. And this shows it by district, school, grade, and teacher. So that's kind of nice for administrators that you would have that. Now, remember though, because your dashboard usually is a little different, and you're going to get availability of different reports than our teachers do. Teachers would not be able to access the performance level growth report. And then on page 82 is more, that's the growth summary report. And I'm looking on that one, that is also for an administrator on page 82. So I did not put some of those in there. But on page 84 is the test activity report. And that one is a nice test for you to look at. And the reason I have these listed like this, if we have a longer time, we'll have one group of teachers work on one work on another, and answer some questions and do things with it, and then come back to the group and share what they found out about that test. But we are almost out of time. And the school to home report is a really good report for, the incomplete report is next though, if I'm trying to go in order of the book. The incomplete test report, you always need to know which students that you have to get back on there. And like I said, if you make sure you get them back on there within 2 weeks, then you're okay. And then on page 88 is a school to home report, which is great because it does tell the parent their quantile measure. Then they're able to use what Lisa showed you on quantiles.com. They can go to the Math at Home and put that in and find out how to help their students with that. Okay, the rest of this is just really what Lisa was talking about on differentiation, and we really don't need that. But so what I need to know in the last few minutes, what questions do you have that I can answer? Or if I don't know the answer, I can find the answer for you. Okay, so now that y'all know how to get on Scholastic Central, that will help. And I think I will ask Kathy to send out something with instructions to make sure. I mean, I believe it's in the book, but a lot of times y'all didn't have books. I'm not sure every teacher had a professional learning guide. And so we'll make sure we get the instructions and they can go out, but it takes 24 hours for it to take effect.